Today, I'm excited to have Stephen Goldfeder from Off-Chain Labs, who's one of the founders of Arbitrum, join us. Stephen, thanks for making the time.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Stephen, you've got a great background story. I guess it wouldn't be a stretch to say you're very much a crypto OG. From a Princeton research paper to founding one of the key technology leaders in crypto, managing billions of dollars of assets on chain. Walk us through that journey a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely been a ride. And when I tell myself that I've been in crypto for now 13 years, it makes me feel old. But basically, I got interested I was interested in crypto before I was interested in crypto. What I mean by that is initially to me, crypto meant cryptography. And as an incoming PhD student at Princeton, I was very interested in cryptography. I had some previous experience, and my advisor taught me about this thing called Bitcoin, which I hadn't heard of at the time. I actually learned about it on Princeton visit days. And then I went down this rabbit hole. This was back in 2013. Went down this rabbit hole together with my advisor at Princeton and my current co-founder, who was also a professor at Princeton, Ed Felton, and some others. Wrote a textbook on cryptocurrencies. Also did a lot of early work on the secure custody of digital assets. It was the Wild West back then. Everything was like, even institutionally, it was like single key. This idea of like splitting your keys, multi-party computation was something which we pioneered on the research front. And then towards the end of my academic career, I got more involved in Arbitrum and as a research concept. So it started off in Ed, my co-founder's head, in 2014. And actually, I always love to say this because it's such a fun fact. If you go on YouTube and you look for the very, very first mention of Arbitrum, you'll find a fall 2014 Princeton seminar where Ed was leading a project with some undergraduates that were working on this. But then Ed went off to the White House for a few years after that, for the last 2 years of the Obama administration. And it was when he came back to Princeton in 2017 when I said, "Hey Ed, that Arbitrum thing, it was about scaling. I think we're starting to see the need of scale. Let's actually build this out." And of course, if you look back, you think we were, at the scale we thought we were seeing then, it's nothing compared to the scale we thought we were seeing today. But things like CryptoKitties, and things that were initially starting to test the limits of the Ethereum blockchain back then were the topic of the day. And we built Arbitrum first in an academic context. We published a paper in 2018, and then we spun off the company from our Princeton research in 2018. And now this summer will be 8 years inside the company, and it's been quite a journey. And very, very happy to continue building Arbitrum. It's never complete. Always lots to do. And scaling is basically a bit of a cat and mouse game, I like to say. So we're never really done. You scale ahead of the demand, but as demand grows, and we're seeing a ton of growth of the demand, we're going to need to continue to find new ways to make sure that we're bringing a great user experience to the influx of users.
And so how should our listeners think about Arbitrum? We've seen the field dwindle down to some real survivors that have really built scale. We've seen Arbitrum go from Arbitrum is Ethereum to, I think you stating that Arbitrum isn't Ethereum. So where do you see it fitting in now in the Ethereum ecosystem and the debate around how Ethereum scales and where L2s fit alongside that?
I think there's been a natural evolution, both in terms of the way L2s view themselves, but also in terms of the relationship of both how Ethereum, or those that started on Ethereum, view L2s, and just how the community perceives the similarities and differences. And what I mean by that is, back in 2021, when Arbitrum initially launched, the initial users were basically people that wanted to use Ethereum, in particular wanted to use the EVM on Ethereum. But they needed more scale, right? So maybe they wanted to do something that was just not possible. Maybe they wanted to do something that was just too expensive to do at the scale they needed to do. And that was definitely the initial push for Arbitrum users. And for many, that's still true today. They're using Arbitrum because you get the benefits and the security of Ethereum, but at a much lower cost. And for many, that's true today. But there's another theme that emerged over time, which is there are lots of different enterprises and other projects that actually want to build on Arbitrum for maybe one or two other reasons. One reason is Arbitrum has its own community with deep liquidity, a ton of DeFi innovation. And if you want to, and we call this the programmable economy, right? So if you are a DeFi protocol or you're a financial institution and you want to upgrade your rails and take your existing financial infrastructure that has manual processes and doesn't really connect to the broader economy and join this programmable economy, Arbitrum is the place to do that, the home of DeFi, where you actually have deeply, deeply liquid markets, but also building blocks where you can go ahead and freely innovate and just connect to this massive market. And the second thing that actually changed is there's another class of builders that are very interested in layer twos, and that's those that actually want to build their own chain. So if you come and say, hey, I want, Robinhood's a great example. Robinhood, we're working closely with Robinhood, and they're building Robinhood chain. So this is very different than the vision of 2021, and there's nothing wrong with it. There are two different, use cases of layer twos, if you will. But if you say, hey, I want to build my own chain, and that's table stakes, layer twos give you a very, very nice way to do that, to tap into the security of Ethereum. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can build a beautiful, beautiful structure on top of it, which is unique, customized to you, and you don't have to worry about building the underlying consensus mechanism. And every upgrade that Ethereum does, you basically just get for free. That's a new class of users, which we didn't really fully appreciate back then. And what I mean by that is, even if Ethereum scaled perfectly and we can do infinitely many transactions per second, but there's this idea of customization. You want your own zone inside the programmable economy. You want your own rules. Maybe that's compliance rules. Maybe those are privacy related rules. Maybe that's just branding, right? And you just want your own branded zone, and all that's fine. But that's another benefit that layer twos bring, which is different from the benefits of scale, but equally important. And Ethereum, by the way, wins with this, because so many institutions today this is their table stakes. Say I want to have my own chain. You think of Stripe, Tempo, Circle, Arc, Coinbase with Base, Robinhood with Robinhood Chain, right? And in those four examples, probably the four most prominent examples of institutions that are building their own chains, two of those chains have chosen to build their own layer one blockchains, and two of those chains have chosen to build as layer twos on Ethereum. No other layer one is mentioned there. So these and what I mean that Ethereum has a unique superpower in layer two, so they can actually serve enterprises that want to have their own chain. Alternative layer ones don't have that. So you're either building your own layer one, or you're building your own layer two on Ethereum, and Ethereum therefore has a very, very big stake here. And for example, when Robinhood announced that they're building on Arbitrum, it wasn't just Arbitrum. The Arbitrum community that was very excited and celebrating was the entirety of the Ethereum community, because a win for Arbitrum is a win for Ethereum. So the relationship has definitely evolved. Perhaps I wouldn't say anymore Arbitrum is Ethereum, but Arbitrum is definitely a very important part of Ethereum, and the identities are linked in very important ways.
Can you give us a 1 minute snapshot of what a layer two is and how it fits in with a layer one like Ethereum?
What a layer two is, it's basically a blockchain that looks and feels potentially exactly like the layer one. Doesn't have to, but in Arbitrum's case, it does, right? So Arbitrum, if you're using Arbitrum, you can use all your favorite Ethereum tooling, and it looks exactly like layer one. But it actually doesn't have its own consensus mechanism. It's built on top of a different blockchain. And what I mean by that is, what blockchains do is basically there are mechanisms to get consensus. So you have these set of transactions. You order the set of transactions, you get consensus on the ordering, and then you also get consensus on the outcome of these transactions. So, okay, so we have transactions coming in. This is the set of transactions, and Alice sent Bob, dollars there. And consensus is actually quite expensive. The reason why Ethereum is so secure and decentralized is it has a really, really robust and wide set of validators that run the network and validate the network and make sure that everyone's doing the right thing and that the network is operating according to its rules. So if you want to go ahead now and launch another chain, well, you can go ahead and try to recreate that consensus. So recreate another chain, but you're basically starting from the ground level. Even if you're going to use Ethereum software, you have to find, okay, who are the nodes that are going to run this software that are going to be checking the network and validating the network. And the thing about consensus protocols is you need a strong majority of participants to actually do the right thing, right? So if you have some bad guys that join the coalition and certainly overtake the coalition, they can actually start pushing bad transaction data. So the question layer twos have is, hey, can we actually leverage that security, leverage that consensus, and not recreate it, but create a, maybe a scaled experience on top of it? That was the original vision of layer 2s, right? So how do we use this to scale? So we take Ethereum security. We don't need to rebuild it because Ethereum is decentralized, Ethereum is secure, but we actually build a blockchain on top of it. And that's what Arbitrum does, where it has its own transactions, but those transactions actually get consensus because they're sent to a smart contract on Ethereum, right? So rather than have its own consensus mechanism, it actually uses Ethereum to get consensus. Now, the thing where this is really cool, where it gets to scale, is you say, well, okay, but if you're sending all your transactions to Ethereum, like, what have we done? Like, you're not really scaling. And the answer is no, you are, because what layer 2s use is they use these things called proofs. But what we do is we have this mechanism where we have a lot of transactions coming into layer 2. And we're able to convince the layer 1 that, hey, these transactions are correct. This is the output of these transactions, even though the layer 1 doesn't have to actually do all that computation itself. So by using these proofs, whether they're optimistic proofs like Arbitrum use or zero knowledge proofs, layer 1 gives its stamp of approval and says, okay, with all my security and all my decentralization, all the layer 1 nodes agree on the state of layer 2, but they actually don't have to do, all of that computation. And then the second thing is, you might want to do this and say, hey, I just want to build my own chain. Like, maybe I care less about scale, but I want my own chain because I want to have, again, privacy, compliance, branding, whatever the reason that you have is. And you can actually do that as well and say, okay, I want to build my own chain, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to change, the car sitting on top of it. Fantastic. So you can use Ethereum's foundation, tap into its security, and you just build a chain that has, a unique privacy feature or some other feature, but you don't have to go ahead and find validators. You have high security that you inherit from Ethereum as well. So lots of different uses for layer 2, but ultimately it's a way to build one chain on top of another and allow you to basically get all the benefits of the stack underneath you, which is, by the way, how the internet works. We have a layered protocol. Imagine that every time you wanted to launch a website, you had to now rebuild the networking stack, right? That would be a big problem. And we would have, a far, far less powerful internet than we have today. The nice thing about the internet is, you just inherit everything, below you, and you can just build exactly what you want to build and tap into everything beneath you. And that's what we're doing with layer 2s.
At the time layer 2s came along, I don't think it was locked in stone that the EVM would be the standard that was used, right? So in a way, layer 2s solved the pretty big critical problem that Ethereum had back in that sort of scaling war era. And to your point, if you didn't have layer 2s, there's no chance that maybe Robinhood's on a Solana, for example, right? So I think, the ability to, scale the EVM kept that sort of ecosystem and that composability around it, which I don't think was guaranteed at that point in time. And I think when people look back, they maybe sort of gloss over the fact that war was still to be fought, and people like Arbitrum helped do that. So we've gone from an environment you mentioned where CryptoKitty kind of highlighted to everyone that block space could get filled pretty fast. It could get too expensive and crowd things out. We've gone to an environment now where, every man and his dog's launched some form of layer 1, and we've basically got excess block space out there in the world, and there's a whole bunch of chains doing nothing, which clearly isn't a problem for Arbitrum. How have you differentiated yourself in that world, and how have you made yourself be one of the chains that stayed relevant and continues to grow?
In the Arbitrum ecosystem, first of all, I think that's the only ecosystem where we serve actually both those customers who want to build their own chains through the Arbitrum Orb protocol, but we also serve those who don't, in the sense that Arbitrum 1 is a top 5 blockchain by economic activity, and you can go ahead and launch your protocol there. And the Arbitrum ecosystem is agnostic to that. If you're an Arbitrum token holder, the Arbitrum DAO receives revenue from transaction fees on Arbitrum 1, but also from layer 2s that build on the Arbitrum stack. They also share 10% of their economics or their revenue with the token holder treasury. So the economics are such where we've actually enabled ourselves to really do what's best for different protocols. Because often, if you'll go to other competitors of ours and say, hey, should I build a chain as an institution? They will always either say yes to everyone or no to everyone, where we have the ability to actually differentiate and say, hey, what do you need? And what you need actually often is very, very unique and depends on the details of what you're building and who you are. So for example, if you're a DeFi protocol, you really want to be part of that core programmable economy. You don't want to have your own chain, particularly if you're a small DeFi protocol that doesn't actually bring users with you. You want to, or liquidity with you. You want to make sure that you're resident on Arbitrum One. But if you're, say, Robinhood, who has a ton of power to actually bring users with them, and users are not saying, "Hey, I'm gonna use Robinhood because they're on Arbitrum." They're gonna say, "Hey, I'm going to use Robinhood because I want to use Robinhood," and therefore Robinhood controls the user there. Then it makes a lot of sense to actually, build your own chain in that context. And Arbitrum is architected that we can actually go from A to B and back seamlessly. So Robinhood, in June of last year, actually launched equities on Arbitrum One. And today they have over 2,000 equities launched in Arbitrum One, and they can seamlessly go to Robinhood chain whenever they're ready. And obviously they've announced plans to do that. But the idea is that we have a very unique offering that actually is tailored to users. The other thing that we've done, which is a differentiated bet, is you mentioned that the EVM, at least back then, wasn't as entrenched as it is today. But I still believe that, particularly as we grow through enterprises, the EVM is a very important virtual machine and very important to support. And I think we'll continue to see a lot of activity there. But more broadly, there will be others that want to build in their traditional programming languages or want to connect the on-chain experience they're building with their legacy code more directly. And we built also something called Arbitrum Stylus, which gives you the ability to write smart contracts in other languages alongside and fully interoperable with EVM, so in Rust and C and C++. And I think this will become more important as we see institutions come on chain that have more expertise in some of these other languages and technologies.
So Arbitrum, one of the best, case studies in crypto, particularly as we sort of reach that phase where crypto reaches some form of maturity and starts to move into, the traditional fintech and traditional finance world. You guys are in the cutting edge of that. Why did Robinhood choose Arbitrum? There's a lot of blockchains they could have looked to partner with and use. And how's that partnership forming? And just for our listeners, what do they actually use Arbitrum for?
So if you're watching this from, say, outside the United States, if you're in Europe, say, and you want to use Robinhood app, you want to say, go ahead and buy a share of Apple on Robinhood, you can go ahead and do that. And the share that you'll get is actually a tokenized share of Apple that lives on the Arbitrum blockchain. So Robinhood is really fueling their international expansion on the Arbitrum blockchain, whereas in the US, you'll get a share of Apple from a traditional brokerage. Outside the US today, again live today, you'll actually get a share of that on Arbitrum One. And again, in Robinhood's case, they're actually powering a lot of their international expansion using crypto, which is very, very unique in the sense that most companies, maybe this is changing a bit, but still, if you look at the largest institutions that have done something on the blockchain, typically the way the structure looks is there's the real business, and then there's this experiment they're doing on the blockchain. And maybe it's a very important experiment. Often it has obviously buy-in from high up, but often it's very, very differentiated from the core of their business. What we're seeing with Robinhood, and why to me it's such a fascinating example of how far we've come in the adoption of blockchain technology, is they're not saying, hey, yeah, let's do this blockchain cute thing on the side. They're saying, no, how do we take Robinhood, the Robinhood experience, and connect that to the programmable economy, to actually plug Robinhood into these pieces, and that you can have these literal tokenized equities that live on chain, and eventually maybe we'll see those go into all sorts of other experience on chain as well. So that's what they're doing with us today. Today, like I said, they're building on Arbitrum One, but the other thing that I mentioned is they've announced plans to actually build their own Robinhood blockchain together, with us on the Arbitrum technology, using the Arbitrum technology stack. And the reason why that's interesting is a few reasons. Number one, as I mentioned before, like Robinhood has a lot of power with users, and it makes a lot of sense for them. Imagine I like to use the analogy, imagine you're a shopkeeper that has a very popular shop selling, some widget, and the ice cream shop next door actually does really well because of that, because people are lining up for your shop to get your unique widgets, and the ice cream shop just happens to have been there, and they're very, very lucky because everyone's now going right afterwards to buy ice cream because they waited online, in this hot line all day. If you use that analogy, who's benefiting there? Well, it's whoever owns a strip mall, I guess, right? Whoever is, ultimately the landlord. If you're on someone else's chain, if you are, Robinhood, and you're actually bringing users on someone else's chain, you don't benefit from that, ancillary usage that you created. But if it's your own chain, your own environment, and others are now deploying there as well, then you benefit not only from your direct activity, but from all the activity from all the other vendors that have come and built in your chain. You benefit as well. And the other thing is, building your own chain, in Robinhood's case, turns their operating expenses into actual revenue, right? So what would become, it's not just like a zero where it's like, okay, either you collect fees or you don't. No, if you're on, a different public chain, you're actually paying fees. It's fee consistency, turning OpEx into revenue, and ultimately benefiting not only from your direct usage from other apps and other infrastructure as well, like wallets, etc. If you own this domain, there's a lot of benefit that you can get from that. So this is some of the I think really exciting and innovative things that the Robinhood team is doing, and we are working very close with them really on this upgrading the stack, if you will, from the current digital but not very advanced stack to the blockchain-based programmable economy built on Arbitrum.
Yeah, and I think that's probably I think you went through some of the most important points there, which is something the crypto community would have dreamed about for years, that you've got users now on a global app trading shares using Arbitrum, and they don't even know they're using blockchain, right?
Yes, and to many that might seem like a failure, but I think that's actually like the biggest
I think
success.
that's the ultimate success, isn't it?
100%. I agree. If we, if you're using and this is actually, so it's a few things coming together. The example that I like to say is, when I order food on my phone or I order a car, I don't think about the deep, TCP IP stack underneath. I just think, I press a button on my phone and food shows up, right? And the idea is that obviously there's a lot of technology that's making that happen, but ultimately, when we're looking to go global and actually not only do things for the little niche, community in crypto that's able to say manage their own keys and remember their seed phrase and doesn't worry about any of this, we actually have to build products that are more abstracted. And if you had to, I imagine you went into your browser, you just wanted to watch, say, a cat video on YouTube, and a pop-up, popped up and said, okay, would you like to watch YouTube on AWS today, on Amazon servers, or on GCP on Google servers? You would just be like, I don't even know what that means. I just want to watch this cat video. Why are you throwing these decisions in my face? And the nice thing about what blockchain technology empowers, it's really about giving people the freedom to know that they can take self-custody of their assets, right? That they're not locked in to certain vendors. The economy is programmable and open, and you can actually opt into this. But the truth is that 95% of users probably, particularly as we go to global state, aren't going to necessarily opt into many or most of those features, and that's actually okay. We have to build an ecosystem that serves every user. And the fact that a Robinhood user that never heard of crypto before or doesn't know any of the technical details of how they can actually, benefit from the technology or use this technology, or if they try to, go on the blockchain and pay gas, they'd be lost. But they can actually now benefit because, hey, this technology is enabling them, whatever country they're in, where they didn't previously have support, to now actually go ahead and buy a U.S. equity on the Robinhood app. That is a big, big win for the blockchain, for blockchain as a technology, and ultimately, I think that is a win, even if it fades us a bit into the background.
Yeah, I think it's from our perspective. The market of people that use a technology because they want to use the technology, right? Back in my early years, going down to the internet cafe and dialing up, it didn't really add utility, right? But you were doing it to check out a new technology. You weren't doing it because the website you got served or the news you got served through that was better than you could get through other channels at that point in time. You did it because you were checking out a new technology and you wanted someone to be ahead of the curve and see what it was like. That's a very small user base, right? So to scale from people that are using technology for technology's sake to people that are using a technology because it's adding utility, that's where technology needs to get to be disruptive, in my view. And that seems like where blockchain's got it. It seems like the Arbitrum's kind of at the front of that.
I agree. The tricky part is, if you are, say, an e-commerce company and your goal is to sell, say, diapers, then you're just measured by how many diapers you sell, and you're very, very happy you sell. You don't really care about anything philosophical, right? It's like, my revenues are great. I'm making a lot of sales. That's fantastic. The trick is with, particularly with blockchain technology, or motivated me to get into this space in the first place, building Arbitrum, is we actually have a set of philosophical beliefs which cause us sometimes to do things that are seem less efficient, but we think are very important. And what I mean by that is, there are definitely places in the world where a banking system doesn't work. But like in the United States, the banking system works quite well. I have a bank account. I can send money to my friends.
You can get US dollars easily.
Get US dollars, exactly. Yes. And, maybe like the user experience a little clunkier than we would like, but ultimately like the banking system actually works. So you ask yourself, like, and the financial system works. Again, there are things that we can improve, but like, it's not like broken in the sense that it doesn't work for the average person. So you ask yourself, like, okay, so what are we doing here? Why are we rebuilding the system? And the answer is, well, we believe that like it may work very well when it works, but like there's also you can look at the list of users that are just cut off from this arbitrarily, debanked, unbanked, or unbanked or debanked users that had a bank account and they woke up and said, hey, you did a transaction that we didn't like, we don't like your profile today. So actually, you're no longer a customer. Obviously, we've seen this happen many, many times, even to crypto companies. This was a big theme. It was very hard during the previous administration for a crypto company to get a bank account at a top tier US institution. And so the point is, there are lots of benefits for rebuilding the system, but as the average user grows, as you were just saying, that user base grows and the average user cares less and less about crypto, often you're faced with some of these challenges, which says, well, the marginal user just wants to get their food. They just want to like trade these two assets. They don't care about decentralization. They don't care about security. And the thing that you have to, again, as a principal builder, and I think this is important, say, well, they might not care about their security today, but the whole reason we're building this is because there may be a point, I hope not, but there may be a point where they very, very much care about their security. And often it takes like a near catastrophic event to remind people of that, right? FTX was a great example of this happening. I hope that never happens again. But right after in the wake of FTX, people was, okay, I see. It was really the centralized systems that failed here. The decentralized ones actually did quite well. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe when everything's going well, doesn't matter, but maybe there's something to this. And that's like holding that line in the face of users that just say, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. That is sometimes difficult, but ultimately, I think, very important, because if we don't, like I said, for many people, like we have a system that works already. If we're just trying to replace one set of powerful people with a different set of powerful people, some people might do very well in that mix, but ultimately that's not like why I got into this space. It's not why I spend my time working on this. We're looking for something a lot more meaningful and a lot more important and protective for really everyone using the system, whether or not they appreciate it right now.
Yeah, it's like keeping true to those goals, but reducing the friction so the utility matches what they could do elsewhere, right? So, I mean, you mentioned on-chain trading. The FTX example is a good one, right? But crypto's just come out of its, it's basically had 5 years now of incredible growth from trading, moving from centralized exchanges to decentralized exchanges. And it goes to that point that, there's a reason you'd want to trade in a decentralized world for security, for self-custody, for all the things that attract a lot of people to crypto. But we've also seen the friction of actually trading on those platforms drop dramatically, right? As the user experience has got better, as the ability for chains to serve requests and those sorts of things so much faster. That's when you get to sort of the perfect world of, a bunch of users that are still using it because they're there for a reason around security and custody, and then new users because it's a better service than the old one, right? And that's when you get real disruptive waves. So if I look at Arbitrum and you look at the model you're building, it's I read a research report from an OTC broker a week or so back where they compared you to AWS. where you'd effectively build a business for yourself, which would be Arbitrum 1, which was successful, and then you realize that you could scale that to other users as well with the same technology stack. What do you think of that analogy?
I like the analogy. I always like to laugh at this because there are so many. It's like kind of like uh, in the Web2 space, we're the Uber for this theme. It's like
Yeah.
there are so many different companies that say we want to be the AWS of crypto. The reason I laugh is because, well, the AWS of crypto is actually AWS. They make a lot of money off a lot of crypto in a lot of different places. A lot of crypto infrastructure obviously runs on cloud platforms. But ultimately, putting that quip aside, I think that there is a very, very strong analogy there. We are in many different ways, and through powering the programmable economy. If you look at who Arbitrum works for, there's just such a broad class of users, and that's really how we architected both the protocol as well as the business model of the Arbitrum DAO and the economic model, so that really it can serve everyone in a way that we're pretty agnostic to. So like I mentioned before, there are many that just want to use the Arbitrum public chain. They want to tap into its deep liquidity, join the programmable economy. That works really, really well for them. There are others that want, like Robinhood, that for specific reasons want to have their own chain. Those could be, again, because they want to capture the value that they're creating. That could be because they want privacy, compliance, any sort of reasons. And we have examples of every one of these, and we support that as well. And then you have interesting, more adjacent use cases, like Hyperliquid is a good one, where for many years Hyperliquid sourced basically, actually all of their USDC liquidity historically from the Arbitrum blockchain, and still a lot of liquidity stems from there today. And people would like to say is that bad for Arbitrum because they're not really on Arbitrum, they're just sourcing liquidity? And the answer is no, that's fantastic, right? They made a decision really without even without any incentives and without really even consulting our team. I got to know them afterwards, but hey, Arbitrum works. And if I'm building a product, it's a fantastic place for me to source USDC liquidity. That's a winning, narrative for me. And I'm very, very happy, even if they're not building on Arbitrum 1, even if they're not building their own orbit chain, the fact that, we say Arbitrum everywhere, Arbitrum can serve everyone everywhere in their own unique way, I think is very unique. And, I guess that would be my spin on Arbitrum really being this backbone that is able to power not one limited type of blockchain usage, but really the entirety of the space.
So it's probably worthwhile explaining. So how do the economics work when people start building their own chains? How does that benefit Arbitrum as an ecosystem and ultimately as a DAO?
So this is a very historic, a very big historic debate in the crypto community. And actually, if you go one level deeper, it often comes to licensing models. And there's this question of should everything be open source or not? And ultimately, I like this term community source. And what I mean by that is open source is fantastic because everyone gets to see it, everyone gets to use it, and it just really creates public value. Closed source, not so good because, stays in a company and a lot of the innovation. And again, this idea of building blocks, it just doesn't happen because it's just not open to the public. But the problem with open source is if you look historically, there is, so many different cases of basically tragedy of the commons where you have the largest companies in the world that are using these, sometimes these crypto libraries that are literally supporting the entirety of the internet. But you say, okay, who's actually maintaining this thing? Oh, it's one guy half-time, a couple hours a week, and no one's actually funding it. And this is a story that's we've seen many, many times. And then when these stories, see daylight is when there's some big hack and people are how is it that the biggest tech companies in the world are using this GitHub repo, but they're not actually contributing to it, and there's it's not a well-funded project, and no one's actually, there's not even one full-time person working on this, right? So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but actually this has happened many, many times. And that's why I like this idea of community source, which basically says get all the benefits of open source in the sense that anyone can use it. Anyone can look at the code, modify the code, do what they want, but you're asked one thing. You're saying, hey, contribute back to this community. And what crypto actually does is it makes that possible because you have the Arbitrum DAO and it's a community that has a wallet. So you can actually say, hey, yeah, that's software. You can use it, do whatever you want with it. Don't need to ask anyone, right? So it's not like
Yeah.
trying to, need to now do some negotiation. No. It's like self-serve. But if you're going to use it, contribute back. So how do you contribute back? This applies, to people building their own chains. If you're just using the public network, obviously you're paying transaction fees on the network, and that's how the economic model works. But if you are building your own chain, there are basically two types of chains that people build using the Arbitrum technology today. There's layer 3s. So Ethereum is a layer 1, Arbitrum is a layer 2. Then there's this idea of building a layer on top of Arbitrum 1, where you actually can you settle onto Arbitrum 1. And in this case, the way that the community source license works is it's totally, there are no explicit fees because you're paying settlement fees. You're actually sending traffic onto Arbitrum 1, and that itself is benefiting the Arbitrum DAO. But let's say you're a layer 2. Right. And let's say, like, the most extreme case, maybe you're just someone that's completely competitive to Arbitrum, and you say, hey, I want to build a layer 2 that's better than Arbitrum using this technology. Well, okay, you can try that. That's fine. And maybe you'll succeed at building something really, really powerful with this technology. But like, you're not explicitly, if you're launching as a layer 2 on top of Ethereum, the fact that, hey, you're using Arbitrum's code is not like some big win by itself. Economically. So the idea is that you're asked to pay, and you're required by the license to pay 10% of your revenue, of your on-chain revenue. So you think the fees you collect on-chain from transaction fees, from ordering fees, pay that back to the Arbitrum DAO. It goes, again, not to private foundation wallet, not to us at off-chain, but actually just to the token holder controlled wallet on-chain. And this is, Robinhood, for example, falls into, assuming that they launch a layer 2, will fall into this bucket. So it's a really interesting model, which, again, you can use the code, no one's stopping you, but hey, contribute back to the community if you're using it. And then the last thing I'll say is, in terms of the public chain economics, I mentioned the transaction fees, but there's also a transaction ordering fee. So we have a protocol that we built called Time Boost, which basically gives users the ability to pay for slight priority ordering, and those fees are also collected by the chain and all ultimately flow into the Arbitrum DAO's on-chain wallet.
Yeah. So if Arbitrum's technology wins and we see a proliferation of chains, which I'm sure you're hoping, like Robinhood, built on your technology, that's an economic win for everyone in the Arbitrum ecosystem, right? So there is an economic tie to that success.
Exactly, and that's how we've architected this. And I think the reason the licensing is important is because it doesn't really add friction, but it does say, hey, if you're going to use this technology and build a really successful business, go ahead and pay, and it scales with you. So if you don't build a successful business, that's fine. You don't owe us very much money. But if you actually do, then you have to contribute back to the community. And I think the licensing is basically very, very aligned. And then, by the way, the next step of this is now you have this DAO, which has hundreds of millions of dollars of assets and has, often diversified assets, right? It collects fees in ETH. It has US dollars that invests in, treasuries on chain, right? It has these diversified assets. And then it says, okay, how can we best do two things? Number one is put these assets to work to grow the ecosystem, right? So, for example, when it comes to asset managers, right? So we have some of the largest asset managers in the world launching funds at Arbitrum, like BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, WisdomTree, Invesco, right? A long list of very, very credible financial partners that have launched products at Arbitrum. But often, these projects, what they care about, these products care about AUM. And they say, hey, Arbitrum ecosystem, how can you help support us and give us AUM? Well, the Arbitrum DAO, in this case, for example, has a program that says, hey, well, we can take some of our stable coins and invest them in these products on chain. So now, the cost of capital, you're actually getting yield for your investment, but you're actually at the same time growing the ecosystem, because then you'll incentivize these people to come. That helps the DeFi ecosystem because they can use these as collateral for their stablecoin project or what have it. And it's a flywheel that basically continues to not only grow the underlying assets of the DAO, but actually continue to invest more capital. And like, treasury yield might not be the most exciting, but we do the same thing in the ecosystem with DeFi, right? So we have these programs where the Arbitrum DAO, or one of the Arbitrum aligned entities on behalf of the DAO. So Entropy Advisors is a company that does a lot of the investment work with the DAO's funds on, on behalf of the DAO. They go ahead and they'll say, hey, we'll invest in DeFi protocols. So what are they doing? Number one, they're getting yield on their, say, ETH or other assets, but they're also now incentivizing many, many others to come and build on Arbitrum as well. So really, really strong compounding model there as well.
Right. Thanks for that, Stephen. And thanks for joining us. It's been a good discussion, and you guys are at the forefront of, I guess, where we see crypto going, which is, scaling now from our native user base, which has been loyal and great to test some crazy things in crypto, to the big fintech users and global audience that I think can really benefit from the technology that Arbitrum and other people in crypto are building. So, well, congratulations on the journey so far. As you mentioned at the start, it's been a long journey, but I think it's been worthwhile, and I think you guys are making real changes in the industry and bringing a whole new raft of new users to crypto. So congratulations, and we look forward to following your growth over the next journey as well.
Thank you so much.